Hi, welcome back. You know, the first time I tried to tape this message, I did the whole thing with my collar standing up like that. Didn't realize it until I got back and put it on my computer. Looked totally ridiculous. So I think I need to start over and try again. I said last time that theology needs to be in communication with science. That is to say that sometimes God may actually use information from the natural world, information from the natural sciences, to bring correction to our theology or to our interpretation of Scripture. We've seen that that really happened in the past. It could happen again. I want to turn things around today. I want to say that science needs to be in communication with theology, that scientists really need a theological grounding if they're going to do their work to the best possible advantage. This time I don't have a great story to tell you like the Galileo story. Wish I did, but I don't. I'm going to talk about more general principles. Hope it will still be helpful to you and interesting. Let's start with this. Science is basically a set of methodologies for investigating nature. There's experimentation, there's observation, there's the inference to the most likely cause of a particular phenomenon or event. These methodologies are very powerful. I mean, science has been able to do amazing things. We've been able to send men to the moon, split the atoms, send probes to the planets. We've been able to look into our brains even while we're thinking. It's quite astounding what science has been able to do. And great progress is being made all the time. Obviously, these ways of looking at the world and studying the world are very fruitful. But science always takes place within a larger philosophical or theological framework or reference system or context. Now, scientists may or may not be aware of that. Sometimes I think they are, sometimes I think they aren't. But the fact is that the questions they pursue and the answers they're willing to consider are often determined not so much by the science itself, but by broader, larger philosophical concerns going on in the culture around them or in their own minds. Now, the problem is this. If you have a defective worldview, if you have a defective theology or a defective philosophy of the world, that's going to have an impact on the science that you do. It's going to have a negative impact. If you have a biblical worldview, if you're seeing things from God's perspective, you're going to find that there's information from the Bible that bears upon the work that you do. If you start from secular presuppositions about the world, you're going to wind up doing things or thinking things or pursuing things that are simply not right. Where do we see this? Well, I think we see it maybe first of all in the whole question of whether we should do whatever we're able to do in science. I mean, there's a tendency in science for there to be a kind of momentum. If progress is being made in some area of research and there's a clear next step, there's something more we can do, there's a tendency for scientists to want to do that. But it may not be the right thing to do. Maybe we can do it, but we shouldn't do it. For example, should we clone human beings? Should we experiment on human embryos? If we get to this point, and it looks like we will before too long, should we implant things in our brains to enhance normal human abilities so that we might, for example, be able to access the internet directly from our thoughts? Should we do things like that? If it becomes possible to do them, should we do them? Now, if you ask questions like that from a completely secular point of view, there aren't going to be very many breaks on the process because secular ethics tends to be fairly shallow. We don't have a lot of resources in in a secular worldview to ask and answer questions like this. The Bible, on the other hand, has very deep resources. If you have a biblical worldview, if you know Christian theology and ethics, as you approach questions like that as a scientist, you're going to have a much better idea of what you ought to do and where you ought to draw lines. Worldview plays a role also in determining what you study, what questions you're interested in. Now, let me give an example of this. A lot of cosmologists today are busy day and night trying to figure out some way around the theistic implications of the Big Bang model of the start of the universe. Now, regardless of what you think about the Big Bang model, whether you think it's compatible with the Bible or not, the Big Bang model is compatible with Christian theology, or at least with the concept that God created the world from nothing, because in the Big Bang model, space, matter, time, energy, everything came into existence at one point. It simply wasn't there and then it was. So that's very, very compatible with the Christian idea. But of course that troubles secular scientists because they don't want to have to face the possibility that there might have been a God who created the world. And so what they're trying to do is to find some way that the world could have existed before it existed. The current concept is of a multiverse, that is, that there's not just one universe, but there are many universes. You can't see the other ones, you can't have any communication with the other ones or observe the other ones, but they must be there. The mathematics seems to suggest that they're there. And they just pop out of nothing, or they pop out of a quantum field. Well, you know, if they pop out of a quantum field, then that means that there was a field there to start with, which means that this is not really the beginning. There was already a universe there. If they pop out of nothing, well, that doesn't happen. Nothing comes from nothing. That's a philosophically ridiculous concept. So I believe that this whole urge to find some way that the universe existed before it existed is probably a wild goose chase. I think it may lead nowhere. I don't begrudge them the effort to try, but it seems to me that they probably would be using their energies and their intelligence better in some other way. Not having a biblical worldview also betrays some scientists into saying some really stupid things. The best example I can think of this is the well-known Cornell astronomer Carl Sagan, who years ago said over and over again, the universe, or the cosmos, he said, the cosmos is all that exists, or ever has existed, or ever will exist. By cosmos, of course, he meant the physical universe. Well, Carl Sagan may have been a fine astronomer, but he wasn't a theologian. He had no grounds for saying that the physical universe is all that exists, for saying that God doesn't exist. His ability as an astronomer didn't give him any insight into the existence of the human soul, or the existence of God, or the existence of angels and demons. He didn't know any of this stuff, but he thought he did. His philosophical presuppositions made him bold, made him in fact arrogant to say things he didn't actually know. And there's been a whole string of popularizers of science who have done this same sort of thing. Let me introduce a concept to you. It's an old concept, and I'm not sure it's completely accurate in all ways, but it's an interesting one and helpful in some ways. It used to be said that theology is the queen of the sciences. Of course, in that context, science doesn't mean natural science, it means field of knowledge. So the idea was that theology is somehow the queen of all of the fields of human knowledge. Now, I think that you can run into problems there. You could get theologians feeling real proud of themselves and thinking that they've got all the answers and they can tell everybody else what to believe and what not to believe on every point, and that's not a good thing. But I think that there's something to this, at least in this sense. Theology studies God and studies the creation in relationship to God. And so in a sense, theology studies all things. Now, it doesn't study all things in detail. Obviously, you don't learn physics from theologians. You've got to go to the physicists if you want to learn physics. But theology sees all things in relationship to God, and therefore is in a position to help other disciplines understand their own purpose and value in a way that other disciplines can't do. Let me give you some examples. Why study medicine? I guess you could study medicine because it's generally a reasonably lucrative field to go into, or because you like helping people, or because you like biology. A better reason to study medicine, I would say, is this. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in his time on earth, healed human beings. He showed compassion upon them. He touched them. He healed them. He showed us, therefore, that God has compassion upon people who are suffering, and that it is a good thing for us to learn to heal or to help the body heal. We are collaborating with God when we show compassion upon those who are physically ill and suffering. That's a good reason to go into medicine. It's a theological reason. Why study astronomy? I guess you could say it's because we're curious. Human beings are just curious. We want to know things. True enough. Here's a better reason. The Bible says that the heavens declare the glory of God. As you study astronomy, as you study this physical universe that we live in, you see its vastness, you see the amazing things out there, you learn how little of it we know, and your sense of the greatness and the glory of God is actually enhanced by that. We don't learn anything about God's character, or at least not much about God's character from studying the physical universe, but you do get more of a sense of God's greatness. Why study engineering? I'll give you a reason. God gave us a mandate to fill the earth. If we're going to fill the earth, we need buildings that will stand up. We need electrical power grids that work. We need conveyances that we can ride here and there safely so that we can move from place to place. We need the stuff that only engineers can do for us. You see, theology, in a sense, puts everything else in proper order. It helps other disciplines to see their own value and their meaning in a larger perspective. Now, science, or rather theology, has for a long time not been called the queen of the sciences. People don't speak that way anymore. I guess you'd say that theology was knocked off her throne a long time ago. Has anybody taken her place? Well, at least in terms of popularity or popular significance or a sense of prestige, I would say that the natural sciences are queen. That is to say, people view natural science as being a really sure means of getting to truth, whereas they're not so sure about certainly theology and many other sciences as well. So let's say that natural science is now the queen. But does natural science have the qualifications to rule? I would say no, at least not in the sense that theology does. Natural science, by definition, studies nature. But natural science cannot therefore tell us why we should study nature or why we should study anything else from that point of view. Science really doesn't have the wherewithal, it doesn't have the perspective to help other disciplines understand what they're about. Theology does. Okay, I realize that I'm probably not speaking to a whole lot of non-Christian scientists here. If there are some, I'm very glad that you're listening. I'm honored that you're watching this and paying attention to this. I just give you some encouragement here. It's commonplace to say that theology is mere mythology and the Bible is mere mythology. Don't buy that too quickly, please, because it's not true. The Bible is from God, and the Bible does give us a perspective on the world that we cannot get anywhere else. I suggest that you get yourself a Bible and read it for yourself. I suggest that you also look for a church where the Bible is taught, and you go and you listen and you learn. You'll have questions. There will be things that will seem wrong to you. Be patient. Bear with it. Try to learn a little bit of theology, because if you do, you may find that not only your personal life, but also your professional life, your science, is actually affected for good by knowing Christian theology. Okay, here's where we are. We started off by saying that science is good. We should study it. We said that when there's a conflict between science and theology, that's what it is. It's not a conflict between nature and the Bible. That doesn't happen. It's a conflict between science and theology. And therefore we should study both. We've pointed out that theology has benefited from input from the natural sciences. We've pointed out that the sciences need input from theology. What we need to do next is start talking about a real case, a real conflict. And we're going to begin that next time, talking about the question of the interpretation of Genesis 1 and the question of the age of the earth and the universe. In evangelicalism, this is a big topic, big issue. We're going to deal with it head on starting next time. Thanks very much for watching.